that these symbols meant something good in the past, and all these bad guys use it for something bad, and so he wants to rectify, he wants to bring life back to him. So now he's using these Luciferian and Masonic symbols for that purpose. That was his explanation.
And it's so typical. It's so typical.
I think there's no need for symbols. I mean, I think there's,
but let's say you do.
A logo, you can do a design. Even on his art, because he has art on his webpage, it's very Masonic. I mean, you'll catch the Eye of Providence, you'll catch pyramids, you'll catch everything.
Hey guys, Cullen Smith here. Welcome back to Lifting the Veil. So this is a graphic that I've been holding on to for a little while now that was inspired by several different sources. Initially, the original concept, again, is by Gary Osborne, as we covered back in Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3 film, particularly when I fully explained the significance of the all-seeing eye, the third eye, the inner chamber, the optic thalamus, all of that good stuff, and I matched it with explained a lot of the etymologies and a lot of that stuff. That original concept of the pyramid overlaid with the brain originally comes from Gary Osborne. This initial image here I also originally saw from Rich Jarvis. Welcome to the Golden Page. Had overlaid a snail shell on top of the Great Pyramid, inside the Great Pyramid as well. So what I've did is I've combined all of these and actually tested it for any efficacy or any legitimacy, because Gary Osborne's model was literally just a hand-drawn human skull, which literally had zero proportions to do with the actual human anatomy whatsoever. So I decided to correct it, or not correct it, but to actually, test it for legitimacy using an actual medically anatomical correct model. So that's what I've done, is I've overlaid the human skull here inside of the Great Pyramid, and the dimensions, the reference points that I've used to align this is I've touched each edge of the skull with each edge of the inside of the pyramid, as well as the base touching the base of the pyramid. I've actually got two models overlaid here. So on one I used the brain itself actually touching the pyramid, and the other one I used the edge of the skull itself, the cranial vault, touching the inner edge of the pyramid, and they both end up coming to pretty much an identical 0 point. And so the logarithmic spiral, which is a select few of snail shells, whereas the nautilus shell is a golden mean spiral, which is more elongated, so that actually doesn't apply, whereas a logarithmic spiral directly applies to the modern and most common human shape of the human skull, whereas actually the spiral follows along, and you can see here I've overlaid the nautilus shell on top of the logarithmic shell, or the logarithmic spiral, and so it comes around, and it comes up, meets right where the pituitary is. It contours almost exactly contours the structure of the optic thalamus and the fornix, comes back around for the end of my spiral. As a reference point, I started here at the base of the pyramid and the skull, and I tracked the outline basically of the skull up until it crosses through to where it meets with the brain, and then it continues along with the contour of the skull, because again you would need an elongated skull for it to actually match. So you would have to flatten out this top of the skull here, basically truncate it, which was exactly what the tribal cultures did, was they flattened out the top of the forehead right here to elongate the skull to make it match the phi ratio spiral. And so it comes down and it strikes exactly where the pituitary infundibulum extends out at the exact same arc and the exact same contour with the thalamus and the fornix, and then sweeps down, passes back up directly right over the sarcophagus, aligning with the king's chamber, and crossing directly where the crossing directly through where the pineal gland extends outward from the thalamus. So sweeps right up past the king's chamber and extends right past the pineal gland and outward, and it comes down and it meets here at the 0 point at something which basically aligns with this portion of the queen's chamber, a shaft on the queen's chamber, but nothing really. It sits just below the pineal gland, but the spiral does sweep right through the pineal gland's location. And so now you understand the true esoteric secret as to why the bishop's crozier or the staff is topped by the sacred logarithmic spiral, directly corresponding from the human skull, where the logarithmic spiral comes up, contours the pons, comes up and around, and comes to a direct 0 point right at the sarcophagus in the king's chamber. Whereas the nautilus shell does not actually sync with the king's chamber, and it actually comes down and it sinks and comes to a crux, or comes to a 0 point here at the shaft of the queen's chamber, using the correct aspect ratio and not warping it and not distorting it whatsoever. It actually, the pineal gland is located right here, just below the shaft here, so it doesn't actually come to a direct culmination with the sarcophagus inside the king's chamber, so that would be incorrect, but it comes to a crux here, just below the shaft. So no, it actually doesn't. And the pituitary infundibulum hangs down. The pituitary actually fits inside the ascending passageway. The stalk of the pituitary infundibulum syncs perfectly with the gallery, and also it syncs perfectly with, again, since I aligned the nautilus shell. The nautilus shell is known for having these, I'm not exactly sure mathematically what you would classify them as, but there are these little ridges that are distinctive, well known for the nautilus shell, these little curved ridges inside the spiral, and the little curved ridges sync exactly with the arc and the exact shape of the pituitary infundibulum. And so those little lines, the phi ratio spiral syncs exactly with that, but the logarithmic spiral doesn't. See, as you can see, the logarithmic spiral comes way up and around like that, whereas the nautilus shell, the phi ratio spiral comes up, and that's what creates the thalamus shape and sweeps around and creates the shape of the curvature of the pons. And I didn't want to make this too long, but I wanted to include this somewhere, and I wasn't sure what type of presentation I would be able to present this in. So, and since it came up with the phi ratio spiral and the human skull just a second ago, I decided to go ahead and just transition into this slide and explain it as well. So yeah, I hope y'all think that's cool. It doesn't really apply to very much. You know, it's not very significant for as far as this presentation goes, but it's highly significant in reference to go back and see Symbols of Power Part 2 for so much more about the explanation of that, of how, again, the King's Chamber is literally how I've corresponded it and correlated it to the thalamus, because by its etymology, again, of thalamus literally meaning an innermost chamber, or which is literally the third ventricle of the brain, is literally the innermost chamber, topped by the fornix, which literally means a vaulted archway, which is, again, the King's Chamber is directly culminated by a vaulted archway. So again, all these other things that we covered in Symbols of Power Part 2 that make it so significant. And of course, this made me sync immediately to the representation, symbolic representation that George Lucas was showing us, or maybe whoever the set or makeup designer was for Star Wars, for Princess Leia's iconic classic hairdo, which is obviously it's the exact same representation and comes to an identical correspondence or correlation with the logarithmic spiral of the human skull, coming to a culmination roughly at the point of the pineal gland, give or take. You know, it's not exactly identical as I just showed. All right, guys, I'm terribly sorry, but that we are out of time. That's all the time that we have for this segment of the film. So we will split this up and continue it in the next video. So click the link in the description below or the box at the top of the corner at the end of this video to click on into the next segment of this video portion. But I've had to limit it to, by popular request, to specifically time limits. So yeah, thank you. That's literally what, so that's what it all means. That's what it all comes from. And I'm sorry I didn't want to make this too long. I wanted to make this a short video, but like as always, you cannot scathe the surface of this stuff. And as always, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch my videos. If you enjoy this information, please share it around with anyone who you think might also appreciate the information. It's my greatest passion, and my purpose and my mission is to continue to produce genuinely inspired and meaningful, uplifting content, intellectual pieces of art. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of just how much info is ready and waiting to be produced. I can't even keep up with the amount of output, let alone the amount of writing that is coming through. We haven't even gotten started yet. We are just warming up. And so we just need to take care of this business, guys. If I can meet my second minimum goal, I will never have to ask or beg for funding ever again. So I want to get to that point where I never have to ask you ever again, because I hate doing it. Honestly, I really do. So I hope I never have to ask again by reaching these minimum goals. Because as it stands right now, I am not able to do this full time. I simply am not making enough to pay off the amount of effort that goes into these. So I can't practically do it right now. So we have to meet these minimum goals. Otherwise, I can't do this. Please help me continue in this mission. And check out the merch in the links below. Help support my channel that way, or support my channel on patreon.com/liftingtheveil. Links in the description below. And I will see you guys in the next videos. There is so much more content coming up. First in the lineup is this 6-hour film that I'm going to divide up about the New World Order agenda and the truth about veganism. It will be a part 2 of my other viral film that went out, so the truth about veganism. So stay tuned for that next. It's almost finished. I'm just polishing up. I want to make sure I cover all the details, so it's very in-depth, and that way there's no confusion to leave you hanging. So look for that next.